we already have few publishers in our project, but I went ahead and I created 4 authors as well. What I want to do next is when we work with book here, what will be all the details that will be needed when we try to create a book? If we do select top 1000 here, you will notice that we have all the book details. On top of that, we need a publisher ID. So basically, we need a drop down where user can select the publisher they want to associate to a book. So for that, so far what we had is, if I go back to the code, for any of the absurd pages, like category absurd or publisher absurd, we were only having the model of publisher itself, but this time we need book. On top of that, we need something to store all the publisher in a drop-down, and that will be model of the absurd view for book. So in our solution explorer, let me minimize this. And where we have our models, I will create a new folder, which will be, I will have to stop the application to rename that, and that will be view models. View models are basically needed to have some model specific for a view. In this case, we need a model for absurd view for our books. Let me create a new class here. I will call that book VM for view model. So what will be all the properties that we will need here? First, we need a book object because that is what we will be working on. Let me call that as book itself, control dot for the using statement. And next property, we need a drop-down for the publisher. For drop-down, we can add an IEnumerable of select list item. That will be for drop-down, and we will have to install the package microsoft.asp.core.mvc.viewFeatures. I will call that publisher list, and that looks good for view model right now. Now in future, if we need something else, we will come back here and add that as well. But right now, everything looks good. If I go back to the book controller, I can uncomment the absurd get action method. And then if we examine the index, where we have the edit, we are passing the book ID in ASP route ID. So we will receive that in ID right here when a user is trying to update. We do not need a category object here. We need a book view model. So let me add that. And in there we have to populate our publisher list. How do we do that? Because right now what we have seen, if we do _db.publisher, it will retrieve all the publisher. But we want to convert to a different kind of object, which is an IEnumerable of select list item. How can we do that? And that brings us to an interesting topic, which is projections in EF Core. Projection is a way of translating a full entity into a C# class with a subset of those properties. It is used to create a query that will select from a complete entity like all the properties in your model, but the result that it will return will be of a different type, and it typically has less properties. Now projection query improves the efficiency of your application because you select only fields that are needed and not all the properties. We will be using select link statement for projection. Let's take a look at an example right here. What happens in this case is we are using .select on customer and we are creating a new object. That new object only has 2 properties, ID and full name. If your customer, let's say, had 100 properties, but you only wanted to retrieve ID and full name based on first and last name, you can see how easy it is to use projection using the select statement, and you can retrieve only ID and full name. Now, even though full name is a combination of first and last name, you can do that right here inside the projection. And then we can convert that to a list. So here we are basically creating a new object of anonymous type, which is cust, and then we are returning ID and full name to that anonymous object. In this example, the customer data is projected to anonymous type, which contains ID and full name. We want to use something similar in our example as well. If we go back here, we want to convert the publishers here to a select list item. So after publishers here, we can use select to project and what we want. We can use any name here. I will just use the I variable here. And what we want to project to is to a select list item. We will add the using statement there. And in select list item, we have quite a few properties. Like we have the text and value that we want to populate. So text, using this projection that we have here, we can access all the properties of publisher. So we can say I.name will be the text. And value, we can keep that I.publisher_ID. We will have to convert that to a string. Perfect. With that, you can see how dynamically using publisher and .select, we are able to convert and retrieve a select list item and assign that to our obj. Then if the ID is null, that means we are doing that for create, but in that also we need the publisher drop-down list, so we will populate and assign that before we return back to the view. In the else part, or if we move out here, that is for edit, there we have to populate the book that user wants to edit. _db.books here, and we will retrieve that based on the book ID. So we retrieve that and then we pass the book view model back to the view. With that, absurd get action method is in great shape. Let me continue from the next video.